Welcome to Unforbidden Truth. I'm Andrew. Today I'll be speaking with a YouTuber that goes by the name of Bulletz Gotti. Bulletz Gotti has a YouTube channel dedicated to talking about hip hop and street politics. Today, Bulletz Gotti will be talking about the gang culture and street politics in New York. If you haven't subscribed to my new podcast called Reflections from Within, The Mind of a Juvenile Offender, you can find us on all podcast platforms. Here's my interview with Bulletz Gotti.
Okay, my name is the Bulletz Gotti. Bulletz Gotti. My channel is the Bulletz Gotti Show 2.0. I am from New York City by the way of Queens, and I was raised in Brooklyn, but I am from Queens. I live in Queens right now, so that's where I'm from.
Okay. So today I want to pick your brain about New York street politics since you're familiar with all that. Can you talk
Okay.
about Crips, Bloods, and Latin Kings and what goes on with street politics in NYC?
Okay, I could definitely get into that. So, this whole street politics in New York City, especially when it comes to gang culture, started, well, the Latin Kings. I'm gonna give you the Latin King history. It started in 1986. It was a race riot that happened. I'm not sure if it was Elmira or Clinton, but it was a race riot between the blacks and the Puerto Ricans, and it was the Muslims and the 5%ers, and they were having issues with the Hispanic inmates in there. And a guy named King Blood, who was incarcerated in New York City prison. I know you may be familiar with him, that he came from Chicago. He came to New York City and he united a lot of the Puerto Rican inmates. And they had a big war in the prison. And from then on, the Latin Kings dominated New York State prisons from 88 from 1995 when the Bloods came in. So they have been in existence in New York State prison for a long time, the Latin Kings. The Crips, the history of the Crips is the Crips had came to New York by the way of these Belizean family called the Mains. You might have been familiar with them. You might have heard them in gangland. They came in late 87, 1988. They were like a drug crew, but it was Crips that were in upstate New York, like Buffalo, Rochester, and they were like rolling 60 Crips. And they had came from California on like drug trafficking. And so did the Crips that came from Belize. They were drug traffickers and they were Crips, but you had to be Belizean to join the Harlem 30 Crips that came from Belize to Harlem, New York. So if you weren't a Belize person, you couldn't be a Crip. So they lived in the west side of Harlem. They were a known drug trafficking crew, and they had got incarcerated, and people who they had turned a lot of the American and the other Caribbean kids, and they became Crips. And that influx started in 95, like right after the rise of the Bloods. So the Crips was here in the beginning, just like how the Latin Kings came in the 80s, but they just weren't like popular like how the Blood I would say rise came in the 80s, in the 90s, the late 90s. So I'm gonna get into the Bloods because I know you want me to get into the Bloods. So the Bloods, this is how the Bloods started. The Bloods started in 1993, um, by way of a man named Omar Porte, which is OG Mac. OG Mac came from 183rd. He was from the Bronx. He was a guy that was incarcerated in the 90s, and it was so much of black and Hispanics, and the Hispanics was dominating the prison so much. And then they had a lot of tension with the Brooklyn versus the Bronx. So it was the Brooklyn versus the Bronx thing at one point in particular time in that time. So in 1992, there was a organization called the Black Lions, which was inmates that were Jamaican and that they were in the prison, and they had issues with the black inmates, just the neutral black inmates. A lot of the guys that were blood, that turned blood, were 5%ers, Muslims, and they were part of Black Lions. So they connected with OG Mac, which the first set of OGs were Deadeye McKenzie, OG Mac, Big Is, Pistol Pete. A lot of these guys that came later, but they were then the rise of it, the 93, 94 era of Bloods. And they started these whole sets like the 9 tray, 1/8 tray, all these sets that came in effect through the way of UBN. And a lot of times, a lot of people, when they talk about the blood history, it was really to start oppression, and it was about the oppression of what the Puerto Ricans was doing, the Nietas, the Latin Kings. And because a lot of them had the issues with the Latin Kings and the Nietas, and they were all teaming up because the Nietas and the Latin Kings were like an alliance because they were all Puerto Ricans. So they aligned themselves to go up against all the blacks. So if you were a neutral black or 5%, but a lot of times that the beef was mostly over drugs. It was over who had control of the drugs, who had control of the slot time of the phones, who even had control of the televisions. And by the time of the turn of 94, 95, the Bloods took over. They started allowing other ex-former Latin kings, like a guy named Polo, who's original Blood, who was a Latin king, guys like Magoo, and many others that were Latin kings that came into the Bloods by way of double crossing their former Latin king members. And that's how they all connected and they all grew. But at the time, a lot of people don't understand is that the blood culture was basically a branch off of the 5% culture, because it started off as a lot of the 5%ers would use 5% lessons and taking 5% talking points. Like they would say peace almighty, which was basically came from the 5% nation. So they were all former 5%ers, and they all just came together and they linked and started the UBN. By time progresses, and when it entered the streets in 1995, 1996, a lot of the guys that were not no longer Bloods came into the streets, and they were turning people Bloods in especially in a neighborhood called Albany Projects in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. That's where it branched off. And then a lot of it was in the Bronx and a lot of it was in Harlem. But the influx of the Bloods, and during that time, they were doing a lot of slashings to people that were civilians. Cab drivers were getting killed. It was to the point that it got out of control, the culture, because it was supposed to be a prison gang like the Black Guerrilla Family, Mexican Mafia, and Aryan Nation. So what they did was they took the prison game and brought it to the streets. So by the time of 1997, there was an interview. It's on, I don't know if you could find it on the internet, but it's an interview with a guy named Sherm the Worm. At the time, he was a part of the Sex Money Murder. And he did an interview with Lisa Evans. And he was talking about the people that were slashing women, slashing kids, slashing old ladies, taking people pocketbooks, slashing people for their gym sports. And the things that they were doing weren't what the blood UBN started off of. It started off of, protecting people and showing the unity of, Black unity. It was that's what it was supposed to be about. But what happened was it just got turned because of other people that were a part of it, and they turned it. So when OG Mac came home in 1999, they had something called spring cleaning, and the spring cleaning was basically for the people that weren't Bloods, so he could check who was the real Bloods and what they were doing. So by the time of that, they cleaned up the Bloods. A lot of that slashing, a lot of those stuff that was happening before he came home and was released, it has stopped. It ceased. By the time he was incarcerated in 2000, 2001, the stuff continued. They started doing the Halloween stuff, like initiations were on Halloween. A lot of people were getting slashed, a lot of people were getting robbed, a lot of those things were happening, and they took it from a downward spiral. And a lot of these gangs, like even the Crips, downward spiral. It started off with something else, and then it just turned into a monster.
So I'm
Yeah.
from the
So
West Coast, and I know a little bit about the
yeah,
history about Crips and Bloods. And back in the day, they had beef; they were killing each other on a daily basis. So how
yeah.
does that work in New York City? Do the Crips and Bloods still have beef, or do they like work alongside one another?
Okay. So, like I was telling you, at the time in New York City, they weren't familiar with gang culture because it was very taboo. Not to say because the West Coast it's always been generational, just like
Mm.
Chicago is generational. So in the East Coast, a lot of the people weren't acceptive to it. They weren't warm to it. They didn't like it. A lot of them were calling the guys that were coming out of jail followers, and the guys that were in prison that were blood or were Crip, they would not bring it to the street or bring it around their people. What happened was in the mid to late 90s, the craze was so big because of the rappers, like guys like CNN, the War Report, guys like Mob Deep, DMX, Busta Rhymes. A lot of these rappers, even Nas, some of them would spill some of the blood lingo that were in prison, and they would put it in their music. So it was like a campaign for it to come outside, and so was the Crips too, because you had guys that were rappers that were Crips that you didn't know they were Crips. But what happened was, like I said, they didn't want to be followers. You know, the LA, they just looked at the culture as these guys is country, they got Jerry curls, all they do is gang bang, they don't know how to make money. That's not what they wanted New York City to be. And that's why you have people to this day, they frown upon just the gang aspect, just the Bloods and Crips, because a lot of these guys were 5%ers. A lot of them were a part of DCEPs and the low lives. So a lot of the guys that were DCEPs and low lives, the DCEP guys would turn blood. And the low live guys that were low lives, they would turn Crips. So it just was just a culture shock because it, like I told you, the culture shock started in 96. And then from 96 on to 97, 98, 99, it just took over the whole New York City.
So nowadays, I think I've told you I talked to a high-ranking member of the VLN, the Vice Lord Nation, and he tells
Yeah.
me like with his gang, they don't mess with women, they don't mess with kids, they don't mess with the elderly. So nowadays in New York City, do they
Mm-hmm.
have like the street code like that? Do they not mess with, old people, young people, like, women, kids, stuff like that, or is it just like anybody's fair game?
Well, there are OGs, like you said, that are against that. But when you don't have any OGs and a lot of these young guys don't listen to older guys, and if they do listen to older guys, the older guys are telling them to go out there and do the wrong things. So there's really not a code. There's really not a code of ethics because there's nothing like it's they just don't believe in not taking it there. You know, just the other day, two little girls got shot. They were just sitting in the park, and really, it was an issue with somebody else, and they just got the after effect of the bullets just came at them and then didn't hit the target. So, and that happens every day. You know, a lot of this be gang shootings. A lot of it be, it don't even really be Bloods and Crips. It just be like neighborhood crews. You know, because like you was asking me about does Bloods and Crips beef? No, really, it's neighborhoods. So if I come from a neighborhood that has Crips and Bloods, they're all unified because they all grew up with each other. You know, it's not like in LA where you have to when you're from Compton and your hood could be Ma Pa Rules, or you from the other side of Compton, your hood could be um damn fuck I keep getting to my names. Damn, it's coming to me, but you know what I'm saying, right? It could be like even if you're from Slauson, right? Perfect example. If you're from Crenshaw, that's rolling 60s, right? So you could be from Inglewood, and those guys don't mess with a lot of those guys from rolling 60s. It's just like if you're from Crenshaw Mafia, you're gonna have beef with the 60s. You know what I'm saying? So in New York, it's just different because it's just unified because these guys grew up with each other before they were even Bloods and Crips, before they went to jail. They were neighborhood crews like the YGs, the YBs, the Wu and Cho, which was Hood Stars and Wave Gang. So all these guys, they unify with each other. So if you like, if I'm Cho K, right? I'm a Wu. I have beef with the guys that are Cho. I don't they could be a blood that's Cho. You know, they could be a folk that's Cho. They could be a Crip that's Cho. I just had beef with a Cho guy. Same thing if a dude that I know is Wu K. He can be a Crip that's Wu K. And I could be a blood that's Wu K. You know what I'm saying? So all these guys, they come from the same neighborhood. So it's a neighborhood thing, you know, not less blood and Crip thing because they all get money with each other.
So let's say you're a Crip or a Blood and you have an OG in prison or on the streets, and let's say you take out like a little kid or like an elderly woman, something like that. Are there consequences to the point where like you'll get beat up or killed, or do they just be like, no, I'll just let it slide?
Depends on um the ranking of the guy. If he put in a lot of work, they'll give him a pass. Because there's guys that have shot kids that had nothing to do with it, and their bloods, and nobody did nothing to them. You know what I'm saying? It's because of the protection. Maybe he gave these guys money. You know what I'm saying? Took his commissary and gave this guy a lot of money on his commissary. You know, maybe he gave him food and he said, "Okay, I'm gonna hold you down," or he brought drugs in. So I'm gonna oblige that because you did what you did in the street, but because you're doing this for me in here, I'm going to give you a pass on that, and I'm going to make sure they're not going to mess with you. And this has happened for a lot of people because a lot of these guys, when they join gangs in prison or maybe have joined gangs on the street, they go in there, and if they're protected, then nothing will happen to them. It's just if you're neutral. If you're neutral and you're not a part of no gangs, it's a different situation, and they're going to do whatever they're going to do to you.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes sense. So you mentioned a few rappers a little bit ago. I've always been curious about 50 Cent and Supreme McGriff. Do you know much about that situation?
Yes. So 50 Cent is from Southside Jamaica, Queens, 134th Street, and Supreme, he's from the Southside area too. And a lot of people look at that beef and the music wise, these two guys had a misunderstanding about um, a situation with him supporting Ja Rule and what happened to him. So they were all cool because of 50 Cent's OG, who is a guy named Black Just, who was like the right hand man of Supreme. Once his OG died, then other things transpired, you know, the whole thing with him getting shot 9 times and the thing at the studio. But it's all because of his affiliation with Murder Inc. and him basically they're not diffusing the situation early, you know. And 50 Cent is a guy that I kind of respect his grind because this is a guy that was blackballed by the whole industry. And it was the guys from Murder Inc. that blackballed him. And he had to go cipher out to go to LA and get a deal from Eminem and Dr. Dre because the New York industry did not want to support him. And this is a guy that had a story. And a lot of people say that, you know, a lot of the time, why what happened to him, why he was disciplined, it was because of a song called Ghetto Quran, which was like a dedication letter to his neighborhood, which was the idols that came from Queens that were big drug kingpins. And he said that the reason why he wrote that record, it was because of a song by a guy named Corey D, who was from his neighborhood, that had a song called Dedication Letter, which was the inspiration for the Ghetto Quran. And that's why he wrote that song. But a lot of those OGs were kind of offended by the song because they felt that he was talking about things that he should have not been talking about, and they felt that it was certain crimes that they were trying to get appeal from that was, you know, mentioned in the song.
So it's been said for decades now that Supreme was the either the shooter or the man that ordered the hit on 50 Cent. Do you know if that's true or not?
That's what was the rumor. That was the rumor was in the streets, and that basically was told by the media and in paperwork. They said that he was the shooter, um, not the shooter, but the guy that hired the shooters. They said that the shooter was a guy named Hamo, but a lot of people said that Hamo wasn't the one that did the shooting. And then they said it was another guy who's deceased now that was the shooter, and another guy who's also deceased was also the shooter. So that's what was said by the police and the district attorneys.
That's interesting because I know in the Many Men song he said something like he got hit like I got hit, but he ain't breathing. Is he talking about the dude you just were talking about that is
Yeah,
deceased now?
the guy Hamo, he's from Brooklyn. He was a guy. He was a known from Brooklyn. He's from Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. He grew up with Mike Tyson and many others. He was Mike Tyson's best friend, and he's the uncle of Mano's kids, the rapper Mano. Him
Hmm.
and Mano has children with his sister, and he was a guy that was known for knocking out guys and robbing them. And he basically was said to be the shooter, but in paperwork they said that he was just only the driver. And basically, he was murdered by a guy named Worrell Hardy. That's from he's from the same area as him, Bedford Stuyvesant, but he's from Lafayette Gardens. And he was the guy that ordered the hit on him because of a affiliation with a guy named Ivory Davis called Peanut from his area, LG.
Hmm. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
So let's talk about the Daniel Hernandez Tekashi 6ix9ine situation. Everybody knows the case, the rainbow-haired rapper who was,
yeah,
portraying the life of, gangbanging. He had Chief Keef and Trippie Redd, shot at and this and that. Then all of a sudden he went from facing what hundreds of years to, copping pleas, snitching on people, so on and so
yeah.
forth. Can you talk about that case, the cast of characters, and how everything transpired and what the
Okay,
aftermath was of all that now?
okay. So the case with Daniel Hernandez 6ix9ine, he met these guys. Shotty was the first guy that he, but no, really wasn't. The guy was the first guy he met was a guy named Seiko Billy. He's family to Mel Murder. He's kind of like family to my family on my father's side. I know them when I was younger, but I don't, I haven't seen them in a long time. And they come from a section in Bedford Stuyvesant where 6ix9ine comes from Bushwick, so he's from Bushwick, Brooklyn. 6ix9ine was an aspiring rapper. He was a designer. He did clothes first, and he worked at a bodega by Broadway Junction. And he met these guys because he was doing music, and they knew him. The Giuliardo, who's Seiko Billy's friend, he just had came from jail, but he knew the guy Seiko Billy and these other rappers called the Pop Out Boys. So he was cool with these guys, and they brought him around. And this guy named CEO Chris was his manager. The guy that you may know, he's in the case. He's the guy that incarcerated all these guys.
Right.
He was like a drug. He was a drug dealer. So Mel Murder was down with Jim Jones for so many years. He was like down with him. He was a rapper. He did rap, and then he was known in the streets. And the kid 6ix9ine was homeless at the time. He was staying in the Pound, which they call the Pound. It's in Bedford Stuyvesant also. And these guys, Seiko, 6ix9ine, and Shotty was all together. And my guy Snow Billy, he's a friend of mine. He was partners with CEO Chris, and he basically was trying to help out 6ix9ine and cultivate him. They had when Gummo came out at the time, 6ix9ine was rapping with a whole different crew. These guys were Crip. They were called Slum Gang. Slum Gang. And he left those guys because of a situation where they said he was in a video with this girl, or he was, found guilty of the case with this girl that was, at the time, she said she was like 16, 17, and she was actually 13, and he was like 18. He was 18, 17, going on 18 in the video. And he got caught in the room with her, and the guys put the video out on YouTube because they was upset that he left and took their names. So 6ix9ine, he had got popping off of Gummo. Gummo was a big record that was big on the internet. And he went to the area that's called Madison and Troop. This is where all the Bloods in that area, the non-trades, they congregate over there. Mel's father owns buildings. He owns like brownstones and a laundromat, because he's like I told you, he's like family to my family, but it's by marriage. So at the time, 6ix9ine, he linked up with these guys, and he helped these guys out, and I don't really fault the guy because I felt like they didn't get the message of what he was trying to do because it was really on some content. He really wasn't using them, but it's like it was business, nothing personal. And what happened was he was trying to promote this song, Gummo. And he had all these Bloods in the video. He gave them black, red bandanas. He bought all of them red bandanas for the video. So at the time, my cousin, he had told me about 6ix9ine. He was like, yo, the kid 6ix9ine, he's with, he's with the family and all this. And he's saying that he told me that 6ix9ine gave these guys $88,000 each, all of them, $88,000. And he changed these guys' lives because he changed Mel Murder's life, because Mel Murder at the time was living with his baby mother, and he changed Shotty's life because Shotty was sleeping in the pound with him, on the carpet. They both was sleeping together. So he helped Shotty get an apartment, cars, and everything. He just changed these guys' lives. He did something that Jim Jones didn't do, because they was with Jim Jones for so many years that Jim Jones didn't help these guys and take them to the different, bigger picture. He was taking them on trips. They were traveling. They were going to Dubai. They were going to London. They were just going to different places with 6ix9ine. So 6ix9ine really helped these guys. What went wrong was they bullied the kid. It's one thing to do someone wrong, but when you're a good person, he's a good person, because I really don't have an issue with 6ix9ine. I really think that he was looking at them as friends, and they were looking at him as an opportunity to just extort and use. And they didn't really care for him, because anybody knows, like, I wouldn't take a guy to a robbery. Like, they did a robbery in 50 Cent studio. This is 50, right? The guys that I was telling you about, the Crip rappers that he was doing songs with, they had got robbed in This is 50, which is like 50 Cent studio where he does all his podcasts and everything in there. So when the guys, they was caught in the hallway, 6ix9ine was in the truck. So when the feds came to 6ix9ine's house to confiscate the stolen laptop and the weapons, they found all these things at his house. And it's because they dropped it off. And I just think, as somebody, that if I'm cool with you, I wouldn't do things like that, drop weapons off and drop things in my house. These guys weren't business savvy. They weren't guys that you could say understand business, because their profession is being muscle. Their profession is being goons. They're not guys that was ever given an opportunity to be businessmen. So Mel Murder was a rapper, but he was also a guy that was in the streets. Shotty is not a guy that's a businessman. He's a guy that robs, and especially a guy like Harv and a lot of these guys, they're guys to be like protection. When you need protection, and they're the guys to call on. But it just, to me, they just mismanaged that situation. And then the whole thing with, I believe a lot of their problems came with is the situation that happened. A lot of people don't talk about this. There's a situation that happened at Cipriani's, where it was a situation where Shotty was told that his services was no longer needed to be 6ix9ine manager. 6ix9ine just wanted to do his own thing. So he had an altercation with Elliot Grange, who's the son of Lucius Grange, the head of Universal Records. And this guy that he went in is a guy named Crippy, who was the brother of and the best friend of 50 Cent. So they goes in there, they fight with the security. The security guard shoots the guy Crippy. They hit one of the security guards in the head with a chair. Police is called. They got out of there. He got arrested. The guy Crippy got arrested. He went to jail straight from the hospital. Shotty, on the other hand, he didn't go to jail. He was released until the situation that happened when the Breakfast Club interview happened, and then you heard the phone call. That's when Shotty was arrested. But by that time, Shotty wasn't arrested yet. He was still on the street. And what people don't know, Shotty was on the run. During this time, he was with 6ix9ine, and during the time he met 6ix9ine, after they did the Cuda record, because he met 6ix9ine during the Cuda record in 2017. He didn't know 6ix9ine. He didn't know him because 6ix9ine was Seiko Billy's friend, 6ix9ine. And what people don't know, before 6ix9ine got with the Nine Trace, he was with the guys that are guys called GKB, which is G-Shine. He was with that set first. And what happened was they took him from those guys and brought him to the Nine Trace set, because they saw the money and opportunity with 6ix9ine. So when 6ix9ine got around these guys, you know, they just did what they did with him. You know, even the robbery, you've seen the video, right? When he was in the van and the Uber driver, like that was unnecessary. And it really wasn't his fault because Shotty was stealing money from everybody. Not only just Mel Murder, but he was stealing money from everybody. He was cutting everybody out of it, you know, because he wanted 6ix9ine all for himself because this was his big opportunity. He's never seen this type of money. He's never been around these type of people. He's around all the industry bigwigs, the Kanye Wests, the 50 Cents, the everybody you can name in the industry. He's around these guys. He's going to parties. He's dealing with different type of women. So in his mind, it's just an amazement just to be around these people from a guy that was, you know, just a robber, a guy that just robbed guys and did little, you know, bullshit drug deals, you know, because these guys weren't, like I told you, these guys were small fries. They weren't guys that you could say, like, we were talking about Kenneth McGriff, Supreme. Like, Supreme is huge. You know, these guys are just small fries, Supreme, you know? It's just, they're just guys that were just local guys in the neighborhood of Brooklyn that if Jim Jones called them out to come to a club to just protect them in New York, they'll come out. But other than that, they were just local guys that never left their hood, you know?
Where does the like kidnapping and somebody fucking 6ix9ine girl come into play with this whole case?
Okay, so the kidnapping happened a little bit after the situation I told you at This Is 50 with the guys that got robbed. So if you remember the video with 6ix9ine and them having a fight at the airport, it was a guy named Harv. He had punched one of the guys in the face. The guy Harv got left. They left him overseas. He was running around with 6ix9ine a lot. It was him, 6ix9ine, Shotty, the guy Billy Otto, and Harv. They were always running around with each other. And what happened was, and a guy named damn, I can't think his name now. Oh fuck. It's gonna cover to me. I'm having a brain fart. But it was Shotty, Harv, and the other dude that was with them. You know, I can't think his name because it's brain fart right now. You know, and they all was connected. And what happened was they didn't like Shotty. You know, they already had beef with each other. You know, they didn't like, you know, Mel. They had beef with him. So these guys all had issues with each other. But because of the sake of getting money and the sake of, okay, 6ix9ine is going to help us get what we need to get to, we're going to work together. But they really didn't like each other. You know, they didn't like each other to the point that they didn't care what it took. Long as they did what they did it on just no merit of having respect for each other. You know, so when Harv and the guy, because what people don't know is the guy wrote Murder that came from jail. People don't talk about him. 6ix9ine was his artist with CEO Chris. CEO Chris and him was partners. But what happened was the guy Nuke and Harv had beef with him and he had got robbed. Both of them had got robbed. CEO Chris and Roll Murder. They had got robbed. When Roll Murder went to jail, that's when the whole thing started with 6ix9ine, that whole thing I was telling you about with the kidnapping. So 6ix9ine was going home because 6ix9ine still lived in Bushwick, Brooklyn. He never left Bushwick. He never, even though he tours a lot, but he still lived in that same place, you know? And that's the thing I never could understand because I would talk to my cousin and I would ask him, why is 6ix9ine still living in Bushwick? I said, this kid is already, he's up, he got 1 million, he's doing all these numbers. He should not still be living in that neighborhood. That's too dangerous for him and his family. But he was living there with his baby mother. So when the guys came and they kidnapped him, they wanted to know where Shotty was. Shotty wasn't with him. It was just him, the Uber driver, and that was it. When they got to his house, he jumped out the car. When he jumped out the car, that's when he went to his home. They couldn't find him. But they came there to get money and they came there for Shotty. So him the next day, You may have heard the audio with him and Shotty talking in the car. That same day, Nuke and Shotty had a shootout in a project called Smurf Village in Bedford-Stuyvesant. They had a shootout. It was over this situation here with 6ix9ine and Harv and them kidnapping him. They had a shootout. Now, Nuke and Mel have always been bitter rivals. They have been bitter rivals because he wanted to take over Nine Trey. So it was a power struggle thing. Even with the 6ix9ine thing, as him being an artist, it was like it was a power struggle to take 6ix9ine from Shotty and Mel so Nuke and Harv can have him, so he can be under their wing. But because 6ix9ine liked it Shotty more because he lived with Shotty, they slept on the floor together. So he had more of allegiance to Shotty than he had an allegiance to Harv and Nuke. So that's why they were kind of upset with that. And they didn't get the money and the cut that they felt they should have got out of the situation. Even though 6ix9ine gave all of them, Nuke, Harv, Shotty, and Mel and Ro, $89,000. They still felt they needed more out of the situation. So, and you asked me about the thing with his baby mother. So his baby mother lived with him, with 6ix9ine. They lived together and a daughter. 6ix9ine was overseas at the time. I think he was in Dubai, and Shotty was in America with his baby mother. And they had sex, and he slept with her. At the time, Shotty was also dating Mel's sister, but they had already broke up. So he got with 6ix9ine's baby mother, which I thought was a term of violations. It's one thing to rob this guy. It's one thing to do the things that you're doing, but to have sex with somebody's baby mother that he lives with, that he has a child with, is a slap in his face. So I kind of understood where 6ix9ine was coming from. I kind of understood why he did what he did.
So would you say that the whole like snitching and everything was from him having sex with the baby mother, not the kidnapping?
No, I think it was a bunch of things. I think it was him, being robbed and beaten. I think it was him being extorted. I think it was him having I would say the last straw was him sleeping with his baby mother. That's what broke the camel's back right there. It's one thing to do the things like rob him, do all those things like that, but to sleep with his baby mother, somebody that he has a child with, is all-time level of very low. It's a low. It's a low. And I think that was wrong of him, and when he wanted to break away from these guys, they wanted to keep him in the clutches because these guys, he changed their lives. Like I told you, he changed Shotty's life. Shotty wasn't a guy that was making money on a high level. So to take somebody from the bottom and then take them to the top overnight, that's crazy. Like the whole world is chanting him. He's putting him on his intro, his songs. He's going on tour. He's his manager. He's making all his money. He has a label. He got him a label. He got him a label deal where he could have went to Universal. He basically got a deal at Universal because of 6ix9ine. Because of so much of what 6ix9ine was doing and the records he was selling, he was able to do the corporate thing. But he was a snake, and then not only that, he was a snake, but he snaked Mel, he snaked Nuke, he snaked Harv, he snaked Ro, he snaked all these guys, including 6ix9ine. So he was really the one that crumbled Treyway. He was the one that crumbled everything because these guys wouldn't be in prison if he didn't do the things that he did.
See, yeah, this case is really crazy, and I've always been interested in like serial killers and mass murderers, right? But I've been more interested in like gangbangers, gang leaders, mafia, mobs, so on and so forth. And
Mm-hmm.
when this case happened, when everybody was on trial, I reached out to everybody, and the only people that responded was Uno B and Frank White. And once Uno B found out that I was talking to Frank, and I did an
Mm-hmm.
interview with him, and Frank called him a snitch and all that, I got this long ass JPay email saying like, "Don't ever contact me again. I was gonna give you my life story." yada yada yada. He wanted to charge me like $20,000 or some shit like that. But Frank kept
Damn.
it, real and like was like, okay, I'll do this interview with you. But his sister ended up doing the interview with me because I guess the warden at his prison was like, if you do this, podcast with this dude, we're gonna send you where Hoover is and Jeff Ford and all these people are. So
Yeah. Hey,
I
you know what it is? I'm gonna tell you why that's happening because Uno B was on another YouTuber's channel a couple years back, and it caused a lot of controversy because they were not only calling Frank White, the whole thing with the snitching thing, but they were calling Magoo, who was the head of Nine Trey, a snitch on the live stream, and it got really ugly. And a lot of these guys, right, especially the guys like Uno B, Frank White, Magoo, even La Brim, he was just on Clubhouse, and they had put him in a hole because he had a whole conversation where it turned into him saying that this man Whack 100 was dirty in his name to the point that he was literally making a call to have something done to Whack 100, to China Mac. And when he got off of the app, when he left Clubhouse, they rushed his cell and put him in a hole. And now he has a new federal case. In his case, his new case that he has with the state of New York and Long Island, it has a lot of his online things he was doing, like going on Instagram and stuff like that. And a lot of these guys, and this is why I always say a lot of these guys, if you're going to come on here and you're incarcerated, do positive things. Do your story, do things like that. Do not go on here and use these platforms to do gang shit on these platforms. Like, perfect example, Kenneth McGriff and his nephew, Prince, they just did something with Nas, the Supreme Team, and they didn't do anything what these guys are doing. They told their stories. They're trying to do it for their appeal. And it was on a positive note of telling the youth, stay away from the streets. Now, when it comes to these guys, some of them will be on positive, and then the rest of them is just they just encouraging the streets to do havoc, and it's dangerous.
Was there any proof or any like, physical paperwork proving that Uno B, Frank White, or any of them were actual snitches, or was it just like accusations with no substance,
Well,
behind it?
it was never no proof because really and truly they couldn't find paperwork, but they did have a case on Crown TV that was dealing with their case. But all it really talked about was the woman that was named Lady Ray, from North Carolina, and it was talking about her relationship. I think it was with Frank White or Magoo, one of those guys. Her relationship was with, and she was going from set to set. But they didn't prove that Uno B was a snitch. They didn't prove that Frank White was a snitch, and they didn't prove that Magoo was a snitch. You know, and I think a lot of those guys, and I'm gonna be honest with you, it's a lot of jealousy and it's a lot of beef. You have to remember these guys were trying to kick each other out of the set. You know, even when the guy SI was alive, who Treyway, that's his name. They took his name and stole it. He was really trying to clean things up in the set, and a lot of people, especially in these gangs, what I've watched over the years, and I have family members that are blood and Crips and all that. And it's always been a power struggle with these New York gangs. See, in LA, I always respected LA and Chicago culture of gangs is that yes, you may have younger guys in the set that don't know the older OGs, but it's a respect value to not to try to kick them out of something that they built. It's like me going to California and say, you know what, we're gonna have a coup and we're gonna dirty his name and we're gonna kick T. Rogers out of the Almighty Peace Stones. You know what I'm saying? It's just those type of dirty politics, and they have accomplished in doing that because they kicked OG Mac out. You know, they kicked Deadeye out, and how they did it was by politics of calling these men snitches, homosexuals, they do a lot of those backbiting things. And this is why I tell people, what's the point of joining a gang when if you align yourself with somebody that they don't like, they're gonna call you a snitch, a rapist, a pedophile, all these things just to get you out of the position so people could turn against you and cut you. So it's no honor and it's no loyalty, you know? And that's why a lot of these guys, when you look at the programs, all you have to do is just watch them on YouTube. They kick each other's back in. The first time I'm gonna be honest with you, I was offered to do the Blood story. They brought it up. This guy named Stack Stone brought me the story of the whole UBN. He wanted me to do the whole UBN story on my channel. And I was gonna do it. This is before Queen's Flip took the story. But I was so busy at the time I didn't take it. So Queen's Flip took it. And all hell broke loose. They all turned on each other. They went on Queen's Flip. They came on, they unified, and then as soon as they got their channels, they all started beefing. Corey King, the Wildcats, all these guys, they start beefing. They start calling each other snitches, gay, rapists, all type of things, booty bandits. And it was like these guys done said they were cool with each other. They fought against the Latin Kings and fought against certain the Muslims and all these guys, and then they go on their platform and tear each other down. You know, OG Mac is still incarcerated, you know, and people still calling this man a snitch. He got stabbed not too long ago in the ADX prison, you know, by somebody that was from Baltimore, that was a part of Black Gorilla family. And you know, you hear these things about this person being a snitch, you know, they're going to act amongst what they heard, because you have these people on the internet that are free, that don't like this man, will say this thing. So if he goes for any other prison, he's in general population, he can get hurt like that, you know? So a lot of these people, they don't know when to just, you know, listen, they can't defend themselves, leave them alone. You know, OG Mac can't defend himself. He's in ADX with Pistol Pete, Larry Hoover, and all these guys. They can't defend themselves. You know, so when people dirty their names, I think a lot of times it's jealousy.
Right. Yeah, most definitely. I can only imagine, and with no paperwork or anything, just calling people snitches, I'm sure it's dangerous for everybody involved, including the person stabbing them, because I'm sure now they got a hit out on them for, even if somebody is a dropout or a quote unquote snitch, I'm sure there's still
Yeah.
people that, ride with them.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. That's so true. I think the problem is that social media has given a lot of these guys the voices to just throw each other down. And I look at the gang culture, like I said, the gang culture in New York is not like the gang culture in LA, because in LA it's more of a community thing. In New York, it's more of a trend thing. You know, I could be a rapper and I could pay you $100,000 while you're in jail, buy you a watch, put money on your books, and I could become a OG shot caller. You know, that's just what it is. There's no like respect in gang culture, because there is no such thing as respect in gang culture. Because what people don't understand is gang culture is not a New York thing. Gang culture is a LA thing because it's always been there. You know, the Crips and Bloods always been there. Yeah, we have had gangs, like we had the Savage Nomads, we had the Black Spades, we had gangs like that, but it's not like the gangs of LA. You know, a lot of those guys that were in gangs in the 60s and in the 70s, they eventually grew out of those gangs. And some of them became doctors and lawyers. Some of them became big drug dealers. Some of them became musicians. Some of them became boxers or athletes. But it wasn't like the gangs in LA where you're in, it's no coming out. You're gonna have to die or go to prison. That's the only way you're out of the gangs. You know, it doesn't work like that when you go in Chicago. Like Chicago is like you have 80-year-old men that are vice lords, black pea stones, uh gangster disciples, black disciples. These are 80-year-old men, you know, In LA, you have 80-year-old men that are Crips, that are original Crips. You know, that were Slausons, that term from the Slausons to the Crips, that was a Crip since 1969. You have Bloods, 70-year-old men that were Bloods in the 70s, 1972. So it's a different type of connection there with California. You have grandparents and parents and their children as gang members. You know, it's not like New York where everybody family member weren't a gang member. You know, like I told you, the Bloods came in 1993. The Crips was here, but like I told you, the Crips came in 1988 in Harlem, and you had to be a Belizean. And then the Crips that was created in Brooklyn in 1997, which is 823, that really wasn't a sanctioned Crip set, and it's still not a sanctioned Crip set from California. California does not acknowledge that set because that was a homemade New York set, and a lot of those guys were low lives. They were all low lives. They were part of the low lives, and they were so infatuated and so in love with the California culture, the guy Psych Bike and many of those guys that was a part of that. They were infatuated with the culture because of Menace to Society, Boys in the Hood, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg. They were so infatuated with it that they were growing their hair long, you know. And I always say this, right? If I always say that East Coast, if you want to talk about the East Coast, like set wise, I give respect to Jersey, Newark, New Jersey, because Stretch and Naughty by Nature brought LA gang members to Jersey. You know, Suge Knight came to Queen Street and brought the Mob Pirus out there. You know, Tredge brought the Double I's and they came out there. You know, they had Mike Concepcion that brought the Crips out there. So Newark is more connected to LA than New York City and gang wise because they respect the gang culture of LA, whereas New York don't. And like I said, they were doing it in 1992. We started in 93, a year after them. So that's what it is.
Can you tell me a little bit about your YouTube channel, what the content is all about, and what people can expect to listen to and hear on there?
Okay, my YouTube channel, the Bulletz Gotti Show, is really a channel where we have opinionated topics. We talk about, you know, street history, music history, laws of attraction, sports, every different various different topics. But we're just a platform that just speak about everything. My channel is you know straightforward. I don't beat around the bush sometimes, but I give people a great analysis of different topics that I talk about, of opinionated base. Yeah.
All right, all right. Before we get out of here today, is there anything that you'd like to talk about that we haven't covered yet, or anything else that you want to plug for
Oh,
that matter?
I want to say this. I really do appreciate this conversation because I think that a lot of the youth need to hear this context of just the gang culture and and I want the people that's outside because the way a lot of these guys tell a history, they don't tell a history true, you know, or right and exact. You know, when it comes to like the blood history, a lot of people don't understand that. Yes, Monster Cody books did inspire the whole culture, but it was more than just Monster Cody. It was George Jackson and the Soledad Brothers, Blood in My Eyes, Elaine Brown. A lot of those books, those revolutionary books, inspired these guys to the Soul on Isis. All those books inspired these guys to start being on a militant type of wave. A lot of these people make it seem like it was just a gang banging and we were just being gangbangers. No, it was about militancy. People don't know the original history of the UBN and just blood in general in New York. You had to understand 31 lessons. 31 lessons is you had to read of 31 books. You know, you had to read. You had to name all the 31 books that you read. And a lot of people don't understand that. They took the 31 and, oh, we're going to beat them up in 31 seconds. And that's what killed it because it left from being a revolutionary thing to, you know, like black on black Hispanic on Hispanic and black. It just became just negative, and that's what I think what happened with the culture. It started off positive, and then it went to whole negative downward spiral. Until this day, we still dealing with after effects.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for your time today and your insight and your unbiased insight at that. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate that too, bro. I really appreciate coming on your show and having this conversation. This was a great conversation, because it really puts in context of the culture. Because a lot of people, they don't dig back into the history. They don't dig back into what's really going on. And a lot of people don't understand the history. So I really just wanted to plug that in.
That was my interview with Bulletz Gotti. For extra content, ad-free episodes, and more, head on over to patreon.com/unforbidden truth. Thank you for listening. Catch you on the next one.